Now, you should never only have one child. You should have 2, 3, 4, 5. Why? Friendships. They suck. Friends come and friends go. They're like the wind. They're seasonal. Family, you're connected through blood. It's never going to go anywhere. Even if you hate your father, when he gets sick, I mean, if you haven't become, completely damaged, you will go back and you say, okay, if you've kind of recovered a little bit. And so you realize that when you have parents and your parents have a relatively good community, where are you going to go? Where do you want to go? You're home. And when you live in a small village, you know everybody. You're never going to be lonely. And when it's time for you to get married, your parents know that you're young and stupid. They're going to look for a companion for you. You don't have to like them. But give it some time. The thing you hated, now you love. If you can find in your physical life people or things that you can live with, to be happy with, you're in paradise. You don't have to wait till you're dead. And I think for us in the 21st century, meditation, self-help books, they're not the answer. Go back to Confucianism. How do you get rid of loneliness? Certainly not by reading books, certainly not by going to therapy. You have some extra cash, even if you see a homeless person out there, buy a burrito, buy a hamburger, just sit next to him, eat some food. And all of a sudden you have a conversation. The feeling of being alone disappears. But you have to be somewhat decent. And that's the thing about Confucianism. Men have a role to play in society, women have a role in society. It's not like today, where everything is just messed up. Not perhaps messed up, but mixed up, to be a bit more politically correct. You don't get married for love. You get married because it's just the right business transaction. You know what it means to be human. You're going to get old, you're going to get sick, and you're going to die. You need a companion to take you on this life journey. Don't be stupid. Don't be such a savage where no one wants to be around you. Find someone. But you can't just find anyone. It's kind of like what you said. You have a Jaguar. It's 1972. How much are you going to spend on this car? It's never going to be new. There's always going to be something wrong with the engine. And you will never trust the car taking you all the way from here to Florida. Why the hell would you be foolish enough to spend thousands of dollars on a car that's going to break down?
It's a 2009.
It doesn't matter. It's a crappy car. Sell the goddamn car, take it to CarMax, get about $10,000, invest in a brand new car, and then that new car will take you to places for 10 years. Look, the point I'm trying to make. God damn it, Kevin. We're all broken. Fine. Find someone who is not as broken to the point where they break down every goddamn minute. Because then you can't do anything. You want to have dinner? I'm angry. Oh, okay. I'll text you like in 10 minutes to see if you're feeling better. You don't want to have a companion who breaks down all the time. That's no way to live life. Another disaster, God forbid if you have a child, what the hell are you going to do in that climate? Your companion has no stability. They're always going up and down. And that's going to impact your child. I went to a place yesterday, Persian New Year's coming up. There is this young woman. She just doesn't look well. I don't know what is wrong with her, but she has a child. I mean, they're both very attractive people, the child as well as the mother. And then at moments you could kind of see this maybe 6-year-old, walking to a corner, not wanting to play with anyone. And you kind of sit back and you say, man, how the hell is she going to survive? Does she need therapy now or at the age of 10 or 11 or 12? Because her mom isn't around. And you have a guy some 3,000 years ago just giving us, I think, just the right remedy as to how life ought to be. You know, you're a woman, biologically speaking, your body is just made by nature or God to have babies. Find the right guy. But don't depend on your own intellect to find the right guy. Tell someone out there, your parents, your grandparents, who should I marry? And don't get married for love. Love is stupid. Business. Does he have a car? Does he have a job? Does he came from a good background? Does he smoke? Does he drink? Is he abusive? Is he an addict? You need to know all those things. Life has a lot of difficulties that it imposes upon us on a daily basis. You don't want to go out with a companion who will also impact you in ways that are just unimaginable, just horrid. You don't want to do that. So Confucius argues, find someone relatively decent, get together with him. You don't have to like him. You don't have to love him. I have this stray cat. I hate cats. I hate animals. Where are you going?
I have to go to the dentist.
Why? You look fine. Go. It looks good.
I know. Gotta check up on him. But I'll see you on Monday.
It was good to see you. Where was I? Cat, yeah. And so, you know, I keep seeing this cat just coming and going. Eventually, you know, I went to Costco and I bought like a 30-pound bag of cat food.
Somebody else's cat?
No, I mean, I don't know whose cat it is. It just comes in front yard, backyard, goes meow. And something on the inside says, come on, man, don't be that cruel. Give the cat some food. You know? And the point I'm trying to make, you know, you don't have to like things, but things will eventually grow on you. And you just hope the good things that grow on you. You know? And so your companion grows on you, and there comes a point where you say, I didn't get married to you because I love you. My parents say get married, I said fine. And kids don't really understand too much about their future, about old age and death and loneliness and all that. And there comes a point where you do as your parents did. You're 19, she's like 17. She comes home and says, I'm pregnant. Oh, okay, great. You don't ask why. You don't ask why about anything. You don't question tradition. You don't challenge tradition. You know why? Because it took thousands of years to create psychological stories that anchor people. You pull down your pants, you look like a man, you're a man, it's finished. The moment you say why, how, when, who, you're basically questioning like 10,000 years of story making. How are you going to survive without stories? It's like an earthquake, a psychological earthquake. You have no ground to walk on, no ground to stand on. And so he argues that anyone who's basically challenges tradition, just get rid of them. They're poison. They're like Socrates. You go around, you ask people why. You love, why? An unexamined life is not worth living. Really? Have you examined life to see whether or not it's worth living? It's only people who examine life, who are forced to reflect, they end up in therapy. Not people who are just naturally, organically, just go with the flow. It's not good to think or reflect. Socrates was wrong. Confucius was right. If your parents say this is bad, it's finished. It's just bad. The other thing is, you know, as a man, you go out there and you work. As a woman, you stay home and you have babies. Clean the house, cook. This is, of course, before 1920s, where one income would be okay. Now you need 2, 3, 4, 5 incomes. But I think as a man, you should just finish school early on. You know, get yourself a nice job at Google or somewhere. Make about 150, 200,000. And just in case your wife comes and says, I want to go out there and work, you say, no, you stay home. And just in case you realize she has too much power, she gets pregnant. Now she has to stay home. And just in case she says, well, I'm addicted to going to work. I want to go to work. Let's hire someone as a babysitter. No, I don't want my kid to be raised by strangers. I want us to raise our kids. Now, that's going to also save you a lot of issues. Let me add a footnote that none of the things I'm talking about right now is applicable to us. They're nice stories, nice fantasies, but they no longer apply, It comes from a different culture. It is a different software. That software doesn't work with the American hardware. It's just a different program. Let me share with you something that exists in the Persian culture, in the Arab culture. When we go to gatherings, usually men kind of gather at one end of the room and women gather at the other end of the room. Usually, if you have a companion, there is something about the culture that imposes modesty on people, or maybe things that are categorized as wrong, that if you come to my place, for example, with your wife, I'm not going to look at your wife. It used to be that men and women would not shake hands because your wife is your property as you are her property. But because men are possessive, because men are visual, what happens if you come to my house and I keep looking at your wife? Well, you have to understand that all of life is about power. Power. You and your wife are home getting dressed. You guys are laughing, having a good time. Things are very, very good between the two of you. Your power is unchallenged. She likes you, you like her. Now you come to my place. And your wife looks at me and I look at your wife. What's going to happen to you? Well, you're going to lose some of the power. And when you lose some of that power, what's going to happen to you? Well, you're going to your identity is going to be challenged a little bit. Your relationship, at least what you thought it to be, is going to be challenged a little bit. What are you going to do with the absence of power now? Jealousy is going to come in. You're going to be angry. Add to it, if your wife was to keep looking at me as well, now your wife is kind of crossing this line where she's flirting with me as I'm flirting with you. I'm married, you're married. What's going to happen now? There's a crack in your relationship. And God forbid if it continues, it's never going to be repaired. What? Do you want to risk all of that for the sake of freedom? Individual rights and expressions? Of course not. You don't want to do that.
You don't want.
You don't want to. Nobody wants to. Even those in this class who are free-minded don't want to. All of us in this class work really, really hard to create a modicum of stability in our lives. And what? You want to just throw it away because of this ridiculous thing called freedom, which we don't really understand? Sanyu, since Confucianism was part of your curiosity, as well as it was the rest of us, you have a group of people coming together. Whatever this Physical space is, this is life. Life imposes events. Whether it's war, whether it's famine, whether it's death, it doesn't really matter. The people who live in the space, they have to figure out what the hell is happening to them and why. We have no choice but to create stories. These stories give your life and life's imposition meaning. Why do we say, perhaps this happened for a reason? But what else can you do if you don't say that? You know, it's like saying, if I didn't go through all the things I went through, I wouldn't be the person I am today. So when your people create stories that will help them psychologically survive, what you then have is tradition. Tradition are a set of stories that give you your psychological, emotional, intellectual sanity. Out of this tradition, you have rituals, things that you got to do on a daily basis. But the ritual comes from this culture that has a lot of stories. Okay? Now, what happens then is this. You're 18. Traditionally, you get married at 18. Traditionally, you have a son or a daughter when you're 20. Traditionally, you retire at the age of 55. Now imagine if, for example, you lose these stories. Now you're 18. What is your GPS? What's going to guide you? What's going to define for you right and wrong? And if you don't have cultural stories, traditional stories, ritualistic stories, what's going to happen is this. You are 18. You are an infant in life. And here's your burden. You have to figure out life because there is no GPS for you. And you know what's going to happen if at the age of 18 you have to figure out life? And today, these days, this is going to happen much earlier. Because you're 5, your parents divorce, or your father's never home, or maybe they have some psychological issues. So by the time you're 10, you're abandoned. And you got to figure this out. You have to figure out what right is, what wrong is, what pleasure is, what pain is. By the time you figure out all of this, you're like 60. And you got a lot of crap that lives inside you. Okay? Now, connect also this to people like Socrates, to people like Jesus, to people like Moses, to people like Muhammad. Why? Because they are there challenging tradition. The Jews enjoy going to the synagogue every Saturday, and they've done it for 2,000 years, if not longer. What does he come to do? Forget the letter of the law. Understand the spirit of the law. Well, how the hell do you do that to a people? Why would you want to do that? To a people who've been okay doing the letter of the law for the past 2,000-3,000 years. What you're telling them, what you're doing to them is profoundly cruel. Unless you read between the lines in the Gospel of Mark, where he doesn't say this to everybody. He says this to specific people. Okay? The point ultimately is that Confucius is all about tradition. All about tradition. Don't allow anyone to challenge it. Because the moment you do, it's going to spread like wildfire. And before you know it, after 2, 3, 4, 5, 10 years, you have no tradition left, no stories left. And you can't connect yourself to anything, psychologically speaking.
Oh. So self-reflection, like the core of what that the wisdom of self-reflection strengthens.
Self-reflection happens when someone is very unhappy about something. Now, before you're actually self-reflective, what happens is, we have time, we have only a few minutes, but let me just kind of do it this way. Because it's good to know the science of it, as opposed to just, this is a very bumper sticker culture. Meditation, self-reflection, all that stuff. It's nice to kind of open things up and go inside. Here you are. And you have been kind of conditioned in a certain way in life. Whatever that may be, it doesn't really matter. Influence of your parents, influence of media, influence of your culture, they've all shaped you. Now, at a certain point in your life, there was a young woman who maybe about 25, 30 years ago wrote a book called Quarter Life Crisis. That you no longer have to wait till you're 45, 50 to go through your midlife crisis. It happens now much earlier. She argued, who had done a lot of research, that people now from the age 21 to about 26, something about them just shatters. If we had to wait to get to be 45, 50, to kind of figure out who and what we are, it's like baptism through fire. Now it happens at the age of 20 because our culture is just moving so fast. And there comes a point where you, for some strange reason, you have these moments, and these moments grow more and more and more. It's kind of like Tolstoy. Tolstoy, at the age of 20, asked himself, what am I doing with my life? But all young people have the power to kind of dismiss these questions relatively quickly. And then at the age of 25, instead of asking that question once every couple of months, now he asks it once a year. Once every couple of weeks. And then when he's 30, the question is just in his face all the time. So there comes a point where even though you've been asking, who am I? For the past 20 years, at the age of 40, it's like an avalanche. Now, what happens at this stage is the following. You can no longer get rid of this new you that asks a lot of heavy questions, difficult questions. And you ask this question for one simple reason. You have suffered a loss. You can no longer be happy with the person that you are, with the job that you have, with the kids that you have, with the companions that you have. Something about you is missing. So before you go any further, the question that you need to ask is, well, what happens when you suffer a loss? What's inside this thing called loss? Because whenever you lose something, and if you're attached to it, as you are to your life, you're attached to your bike, to your car, to your companion, to your job, to your identity, to your culture. When you suffer a loss, it means that you lose meaning. Now what you find yourself is in a grieving stage. You grieve. Now, it's going to take you a long time before you can grieve healthily, maturely. Because initially when you start grieving, it comes with a good amount of anger. And this is devastating. Some people don't recover quickly. So whenever you engage in self-reflection, you begin your, what they call the desert life. There is nothing in your life that can nourish you. You get really, really depressed sometimes, and you get really, really lonely. And no one can come and reach you. It's impossible. You have 5 minutes, right? Now, I forget your question. What was your question?
Oh, I was just.
Oh, self-reflection. And even this class familiar with Elizabeth Kubler-Ross? She was this young woman from, I think, Germany. And for some strange reason, she was interested in people who were dying, sick and dying. And she came up with these 5 steps that people go through. First, You deny the fact that you're sick and dying. Then there comes a point where you can no longer deny it. Then you become angry. And there comes a point where you are able to deal with anger relatively healthily. And then what you do is you begin to make, she has this word, I forget what it is. It's kind of like a business transaction. You tell God, if you give me another couple of years, I'll be good to my kids. Yeah, it's your bargaining stage. You're right. Thank you. You begin to bargain with the things out there because you assume that if you're able to be successful in your bargaining, you won't die. Right? But you pray to God, but God doesn't answer back. And then it gets you really, really depressed because this doesn't work. And then if you're lucky, you get to a place of acceptance. Now, this is, for her, I think, is mostly about people who are physically just sick and getting close to death. I think, on the other hand, whenever anybody is going through a loss, whether the loss of a physical life or the loss of an emotional life or an intellectual life or a psychological life or a spiritual life, you have no choice but to go through these. You know? I think for those of you, I think many of you were in here last week, Wednesday was it, when we had that conversation about gender identity? You know, it's such a waste of time for those of you who have friends or maybe children or maybe parents or maybe you yourself are going through these dilemmas. You know, if you're a he or a she or a they or whatever pronouns may be out there, you know, you can't just talk about this stuff in isolation because it involves so many different things. First, you have to understand that if, for example, I've been a boy for most of my life and all of a sudden I have this feeling that I was born in the wrong body or maybe I want to be preferred for myself as a woman, for example, you have to look at the position of parents. You have to understand what it means to be a parent. Okay? So if you're a son or a daughter who wants to go and expose yourself to your parents, you need to understand that when you tell them something they're not accustomed to, they don't know how to deal with, well, they're going to deny it. No, my son can't be right. He is mistaken. And like any parent who dream that they're going to walk the aisle with their child, see them get married, have grandkids, and all of a sudden the girl comes out and says, I'm a boy. Your parents are suffering a loss. This is not just about you anymore. You have exposed your parents to certain realities that it's going to take them some time to deal with. Okay? That's the first thing you need to understand. The second is, at what stage do you come to say, I am no longer a he but a she? Remember, we are very, very complicated little animals. You know, these bumper sticker answers are not going to do anyone any good. You also need to understand that, look, about maybe 10, 15 years ago when Teslas were coming out, when you would see a Tesla on the road, you would say, at least assume that that guy is driving a Tesla because he loves the environment, he loves trees, he loves dolphins. You know, he doesn't want to pay PG&E because it's a corrupt system. Maybe he's making a good amount of money as well. Okay? So we would have these imaginations about these rare people who would drive Teslas around. You would see one Tesla in an ocean of 1,000 cars drive around now. Every 5 car, one is a Tesla. And I doubt very much you're going to say everybody's environmentally friendly. It's now fashionable. Everybody drives it. It's good. But it's not because people love animals or love trees or love the ocean. It's just something to do now. And so all of a sudden you realize, well, things are not as easy anymore. You have to kind of sit back and say, why are people buying Teslas? Is it about power? Is it about status? Is it because people are simply bored? Anyways, so when we come back on Wednesday, what we'll do, we'll talk about the 5 stages that you and I have to go through in order to be relatively self-sufficient. And they are a little complex, heart-wrenching, difficult. So, it's good to see all of you. Take care of yourselves.
I mean, nothing is life is easy.
Yeah. Take care. Bye.
Hey, there you go.